Morning, professors. Good morning to you, my fellow students, and thank you very much for logging in this early today. I request that we unmute we mute so that we avoid the echoes. Yes. Thank you very much for joining us this morning, especially for those who are joining us for the very first time. You're very, very welcome. I also want to recognize the fact that we have people joining from different parts of the world and from different universities right here in Uganda. You're very, very welcome this morning. Allow me appreciate our senior members, mentors who are here already with us in the Students' Congress. To begin with, allow me appreciate one of our professors who does not miss Students' Congress, at least for a very long time now. I noticed that he's always there, and that is Professor James Kagari. Professor, we appreciate. Thank you very much for always being around with us every Sunday morning. And we appreciate your commitment and the guidance that you offer. Thank you, and thank you very much. Allow me also appreciate our very own Professor Joseph Mtai. Thank you very much for the commitment. Sometimes I know sometimes you're not well, but even when you're not very well, you're always there. Thank you for loving us, and thank you for creating this platform that unites PhD students all over the world. Thank you very much. My fellow students from different universities, I see my colleagues my friends from Tanzania already here, some people from Kenya, I can see you, and I can see some friends from Tanzania. Thank you very much for always coming up and joining this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, in the Students' Congress last week, we left 2 questions unanswered, and today we may attempt to answer one, and next week, if all goes well, we'll also attempt to answer the other one. One of the questions that we left unanswered, I think, was on variables, and I remember a student asked a question on categorical variables. Student asked, what is a categorical variable? And maybe today we shall try to find answers for that one. And then the other question that I think I posed to the class, and we are still trying to find answers, is that why do we have to transform variables before we do the analysis? So those were some of the 2 questions, I think, and today we may try to answer one, and then maybe next week I will also answer the other one. I will play 2 short clips today. The first one will be on categorical variables, and then the other one will be a continuation of the series of what we've been doing on data management and analysis using SPSS. So allow me play this short video that we'll be able to watch. Then later on, we'll be able to make some few comments after watching them. So welcome with me to watch the first clip.
So we have to start with our today's lecture. This is basically on SPSS. I am
In the last video, we talked about the correlation analysis. And first, we started off with what is correlation, how do we interpret it, and then we went on to analyzing it in SPSS. In this lecture, we'll be talking about the linear regression using SPSS. So first of all, we'll talk about what is regression, what is a simple and multiple regression, then what is linear regression, and then what is correlation.
In quantitative research, it's very important to have basic understanding of the classification of variables and types of scales. So in this short video, I will be covering these two important points. Variables are generally classified in two forms. One is categorical, other is numerical. Categorical, that are qualitative variables that take categories as their values, such as yes, no, or blue, brown, green. So these are categories and taken as values. Yes is one category, no is another category. This can be changed. No can come first, yes can go second, doesn't matter. Numerical variables are those, especially these are quantitative in nature and have values that represent a counted and or measured quantity. Remember, most important point here is counted or measured. When it comes to counted, these are discrete variables. Discrete variables arise from the counting process, but continuous variables arise from the measuring process. So that's why all the numerical variables, either they will have counted or measured quantity. If counted, these are discrete. If measured, these are continuous. Let's understand what is counted and what are the examples of counted versus measured quantity. Let's say the question is, do you have a Facebook profile? If that is a question, very simple answer, yes or no. So as there are only two categories, so it is a categorical variable. If question is, how many text messages have you sent in the past 3 days? In order to answer this question, what you need to do is to start counting. Message number 1, number 2, number 3, number 10, number 20, number 50, whatever. So after counting, you will be able to respond, I have sent 30 messages. Now this 30 is a numerical form, as this 30 arise from counting process, therefore it is a discrete variable. But if a question is, how long did the mobile app update take to download? So you cannot count anything. You cannot answer yes or no. What you need to do, you have to have some measurement tool to observe how much time it takes to download. So what you need a clock. So this clock through which you can measure the time, and then you can answer this question. So this is a numerical variable, but the form is continuous because it is coming from the measured process. So this is how we can easily understand the difference between categorical and numerical variables. Now, under the categorical variables, there are further two forms. One is nominal and other is ordinal. Remember, nominal is very simple. It only defines categories. Just now I said yes or no. So that is the form of nominal. There is no order needed. Marital status, single, divorce, married, separated, four categories, but can come here and there. There is no order needed. But when it comes to the ordinal variable, there is the property of defined categories as well as ordered categories. So you need to have some order. This better, good, best, we cannot come like this. We always say good, better, best. So three categories, and these are in order. Okay, so second, when it comes to the numerical variable, this is discrete. For example, number of children in your house. So you start counting 1, 2, 3. Defects per hour. So you start counting how many defects per hour in a factory. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. So 10 defects per hour in a factory, for example. So you started counting, hence it is a discrete variable. But if somebody asks you, what is your weight? So you need a weight machine to weigh your weight, right? That's why you have to have some measured characteristics. So this is the form of the continuous variable which comes through measurement. Now, when it comes to the measurement scales, there are 4 scales aligned with what we have just now discussed. These 4 scales, as I said, one is nominal scale. Very simple. I already explained about what is nominal scale. That classifies data into distinct categories in which no ranking is employed. Ordinal scale, it classifies data into distinct categories in which ranking is implied. There is always a rank. For example, instructor, assistant professor, associate professor, and professor. There is no such thing like a person after graduation will join as a professor, then he will be promoted as assistant professor, then instructor, then associate professor. No, it always comes in order form. Instructor or lecturer, then assistant professor, then associate professor, and then professor. So that's why this is the ordinal scale. When it comes to interval scale, it's very interesting to understand the difference. Interval scale is an ordered scale. You see, still that is an ordered because it has the property of nominal and ordinal, but it has one additional property. It is an ordered scale in which the difference between measurement is a meaningful quantity, but the measurements do not have a true 0 point. What does it mean? There is no absolute zero. There is no absolute zero in the data. There is always equal degrees between categories. For example, you are standing in a shopping mall, you want to observe the customers walk into a shopping mall. So customer number 1 came at 9 o'clock, the second one at 9.5, third is 9.10, fourth is 9.15. So you can see there is an equal interval of 5 between the customer number 1 and number 2 and number 3, number 4. That is interval. But let's say if customer number 1 came at 9, second came at 9.2, third came at 9.7, fourth came at 9.15, so there is no equal interval. So it is only an ordinal form. There is no equal interval. For example, temperature 0 degrees centigrade, 25 degrees centigrade, 50, 75 and 100 degrees centigrade. No absolute degree, a 0, no absolute 0. Now you will be surprised to see there is a 0, but what does it mean? Do not have a true 0 point. The point here is true 0 point. It means that this zero is not an absolute zero. When it comes to temperature, it can be 0 degrees centigrade, but it doesn't mean that there is no temperature. There is a temperature, but it's 0 degrees centigrade. So this zero doesn't create any meaning. It is not in absolute zero form. Number two, there is an equal difference between categories. So 0 to 25, 25 to 50, then 75, then 100. So there is a difference of equal categories, difference of 25 degree. For example, this 25 to 50, it doesn't mean that the 50 is the twice of 25 when it comes to the interval scale. It is the interval between 2 points, and this, there is a zero, but that is not in absolute form. It's not a true zero. It is just giving us a property that there is a temperature equal to 0. Now, when it comes to ratio scale, it is an ordered scale in which the difference between the measurement is a meaningful quantity, same as just now we said about interval, and the measurements have a true 0 point. This is the important point, important difference between interval and ratio. Measurement have a true 0 point. It does not mean absence of the property. For example, weight 0 kilogram, 20 kilogram, 40 kilogram, 60 kilogram. Now you see this 0 kilogram, it means there is no weight. 0 marks, there are no marks. So now that is a true zero. It is not in absolute form. That is a true zero. When there is a zero, it means nothing. But here, when it is zero, it doesn't mean nothing. There is a temperature. Its category is 0 degree. It's degree. So that is how we differentiate between interval and ratio scale. So this zero create a meaning. Does not mean absence of property. Here, zero property is available, but here the property is absent. So for ratio, we always need a scale. For ratio, we always need a scale that we use to measure its properties. So concluding, when we plot in a way nominal scale, ordinal, interval, and ratio scale, and we want to give them in this order. So when it comes to the name of categories, defining categories, so all have the same properties. Yes, we have to define categories. We need to give order. For nominal, no need, but for ordinal, interval, and ratio, yes. Difference in measure is measurable. When it comes to the difference between two data points, in nominal and ordinal, difference is not measurable. But in interval and ratio, difference between two data points is measurable. And finally, true zero, for nominal, ordinal, and interval, there is no true zero, but in ratio, zero means real zero. Zero mean real zero. So this is how we understand the classification of variables and the types of scales. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, I'm using two gadgets, and there's really a lot of downpour here at my place. Let me confirm that you can hear me well.
Yes, I can hear you very well from my end.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we have...
I can also hear you from US.
Ah, very, very, very welcome. And thank you for joining our Students' Congress this morning. I want to believe that we have tried to answer one of the questions that was raised last week. It was about the categorical variables. And I think the question was raised by my sister Peace. I wish I could hear from Peace whether we are at the same page now.
Yes, morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My brother. Thank you, my brother. I'm so humbled.
You're welcome. Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any comment you would like to share with us, I want to give you just some few minutes to do that. Then we'll be able to look at the second clip. Just unmute and make your comment, and then we be able to move on. Remember, this is our time as students. At this point, no one is right and no one is wrong. Feel free to share your ideas and we discuss them. At some point, when we feel that we have not reached a consensus on certain ideas, we'll always go back and look for solutions. But the good news is that we have our mentors here and they are listening. So where we are stuck, we can always ask for help. So if you have anything that we want to make mention of, especially in regards to the clip that we have just watched, I would welcome you to do that. Okay. Where silence could possibly mean that we are comfortable.
Yes, I was just suggesting maybe we move on to the next clip. If a question comes, a member can still bring it.
Thank you very much. Let's go there. I have to change. I am using two gadgets, so I have to keep changing here and there. So that's, please just bear with me.
The correlation analysis. And first we started off with
Joseph, is it possible to unmute?
Joseph, there is no sound.
A regression line, and by looking at this regression line, we can easily say that with the passage of time, or after 1967, the percentage of people
Are we okay
and the
now?
percentage of the adults who smoke
Okay, but
actually
we
is
may start.
decreasing.
Just starting
So
the
this is
middle.
what regression does for us. In the last video, we talked about the correlation analysis. And first we started off with what is correlation, how do we interpret it? And then we went on to analyzing it in SPSS. In this lecture, we'll be talking about the linear regression using SPSS. So first of all, we'll talk about what is regression, what is a simple and multiple regression, then what are some of the important values that we interpret in regression, which is R square, F statistics, beta, and T statistics. And then we will talk about the fitness of a line in regression, in which we'll be using SPSS to fit a regression line in simple and multiple regression analysis. So let's start. First of all, we need to understand what is linear regression. So these are going to be our topics. What is linear regression? What is multiple and simple regression? And we will also define the relationship and the models there. And then these some values, R square, F stats, beta, and T stats. And then at the end, we'll be using SPSS to calculate regression. Now, we are not going to go into a lot of detail, but we'll be covering the very basics of linear regression. We use linear regression to analyze and to predict the relationship between two or more variables. So whenever we are interested in knowing the causal relationship between two or more variables, we use linear regression. Based on the data of the variables, a line is actually modeled to predict a relationship. We can understand it better if we just look at this example. Now, this is the data from two variables. The one data is the years, as the years are changing from 1967 onwards, and data has been taken after every 5 years. So 67 is here, then 5 years after that, and 10, and then 15. And on this side, we have taken the percentage of adults who smoke. So looking at this value, the data says that in 1967, 40% or 42% of the people, adults, used to smoke. And then after 5 years, the data says that about 38% of the people smoke. And then this is the data, and then this is the data. Now, what these black dots are saying, these are talking about the data of the two variables plotted on a scatter plot. So what regression does for us is that based on these small differences, which is going, sometimes it is going above the line, sometimes it is going below the line, based on these values of the data on two variables. One is the year and the other is the adults who smoke, the number of and the percentage of the adults who smoke. Based on the data of these two variables collectively, it makes a regression line. And by looking at this regression line, we can easily say that with the passage of time, or after 1967, the percentage of people and the percentage of the adults who smoke actually is decreasing. So this is what regression does for us, is that for two variables and also for multiple variables, it gives us this line, and which you fit based on the data, and you can easily predict what kind of relationship is there between two variables. And if you're using a multiple regression, then you can also say what kind of relationship is there among different variables with the dependent variable. So if you want to go more into details, then you have to read about it and go and read some good book about econometrics. But as we are covering just the basics, so we'll only be talking about this scatter plot. Now, some important things that we need to understand is that if we are saying that we are going to run a simple regression, this simply means that at one time we are using one independent variable and one dependent variable. So what we are trying to do, we are trying to measure a relationship of one variable which is independent with the one dependent variable. So if we have one independent variable with one dependent variable, we will call it simple regression. We will also recall it when we are going to go to our SPSS analysis. One thing that we need to make sure here is that in linear regression, at one point of time, dependent variable. We will also talk about it when we go to SPSS. But remember that in linear regression, you can only use one dependent variable at one time. But we can use one or more than one variables at one point of time when we are doing the regression analysis. So if we are analyzing analyzing the regression with one independent variable with dependent variable, we call it simple regression. But if we have more than one variables with dependent variable, for example, two or more than two, we will call it multiple regression, because now we have multiple independent variables and one dependent variable. Now, another thing that we need to know here is that when we were saying that we are using a simple regression, we are measuring one relationship. This can be any variable, this can be any variable based on your theoretical framework, but this is one relationship. But at the same time, this is one model. This is also one model. Now, when we move to this multiple regression, here we are measuring two relationships, one with this IV to this dV, one with this IV to this dV. There are two relationships that we are measuring, but we are measuring one model. So here we have one model, one relationship. Here we have one model, but two relationship. And if we add on one more independent variable here, and suppose we have three independent variables, and we are regressing it with one dependent variable, then again we will be using one model, but we are checking three relationships. And you can add any number of variables as independent variables to regression model, but it will be called a multiple regression if it has more than one variables as independent variables. So this is also something that we need to remember. Now, what are some of the important values that we interpret in linear regression? Although there are some other important values that we need to keep in mind. But these are the 4 important values that we usually study in most of the researches. That is R square, F statistics, beta, and T statistics. Now, R square will actually tell you, or it explains the variation in dependent variable because of the independent variables in a model. So here we analyze that how much variation in percentage is there in dependent variable based on one or more variables that are there in the model. So this is how you try and explain it. We will also talk about it when we will analyze the regression in SPSS. So suppose if the value of R square is 0.59, we will say that 59% of the variation in DV, which is dependent variable, is happening because of the independent variable. The second thing is the F statistics. These are also the values that you get in your regression analysis. It predicts the model fitness of regression. And we are really interested in the level of significance. So for now, if the value of F statistics is significant, we will say that the model is fit for regression. And the significance, for now, we will only say that if the F stat significance value is less than 0.05, then we will call it a significant value. You can see my other video, what's the deal with significance, for more detail. The beta value actually indicates that with 1 unit change in independent variable, the beta units will change in dependent variable. For example, if you say, if you're trying to measure the expenditures, and if we get a beta of say 0.50, it means that if your income will increase $1, $0.5 your expense are going to increase. This is what it predicts. So beta, with 1 unit change in IB, which means independent variable, the beta, whatever value of beta you get, beta units will change in DV. We will also explain it when we'll go to the SPSS analysis part. And the last is the T statistics. The T statistics are actually used to determine if you should support or reject your null hypothesis. Now, while you're listening to this, please be very sure that you have the idea of alternate and null hypothesis, because sometimes people say that if the T value is significant, you accept your hypothesis. So when you say accept your hypothesis, you're saying you accept your alternate hypothesis. But when people are saying that if T values are significant and you need to reject your hypothesis, they're talking about to reject the null hypothesis. So if you're not getting this point, please make sure that you understand what is null and alternate hypothesis. So these are the 4 important values that we study in regression. But one last thing here is that these 2 values, the R square and the F statistics, they talk about the regression model. Remember that we were talking here that this is one model, but one relationship. This is one model, 2 relationships. If we talk about R square and F statistics, they both of them talk about the model part. They talk about the how much variation is happening in DV because of all the IVs that are there. But this beta, unstandardized coefficient, or it is also known as beta, and T statistics, they talk about the relationship part. So if you just look at these models again, now this is one model, but we are measuring 2 relationships. So for this one model, we will get one value of R square, one value of F statistics, but we will get two values of beta because we are looking at two relationships, and we will get two values of T statistics. Why? Because these upper two values, they talk about the model, and these lower coefficients and T statistics, they talk about the relationship. Now, let's go to SPSS and see how we analyze or we run the regression analysis. Again, you will have to go to your analyze window. In the analyze, you need to go to regression, linear. Once more, analyze, regression, linear. There are so many types of regressions, but this time we're only going to go for a linear regression. So when we just click here, we have this kind of window with us. Now, if you remember what we've been doing in our last videos, now let's talk about how innovation as a dependent variable is being affected by the formalization. Now, one important thing to note here is that the moment we place dependent variable, one dependent variable, the next time we try and place any more variables in the dependent part, the SPS is not going to allow us. Why? Because in linear regression, as we talked about, there can only be one dependent variable at one point of time. But we can add as many variables as we wish in the independent list. So you can have multiple independent variables, but you can have only one dependent variable. Now, we are only interested in knowing how formalization affects innovation. Or in other words, we want to see a relationship between formalization and innovation. Formalization is our independent variable and innovation is our dependent variable, as it is also written on this analysis map. So for now, just click OK. And these are the results that we are going to get. Now, if you just look at these results, we have these three tables. First of all, it is saying R square, which is 0.258. Now, this means that 25.8% of the variation in innovation is happening because of this formalization. Then if we move on to our F statistics, the F value is 86.44, but the most important thing is to look at the significance value. Significance, how much we want it? We want it to be less than 0.05. So it is definitely less than 0.05. It is 0.0000, although it is not absolutely 0.00000. There might be some number at some decimal level, but it is definitely less than 0.05. So we are fine with our F value because we can say that model is fit for regression. We have 25.8% variation in dB because of IB. The other thing that we need to look at is this beta, unstandardized coefficient. First, you get this constant. Currently, we're not bothered about this constant and you can ignore these values, but we are interested in the beta of formalization, which is present in front of the formalization. Now it is saying negative 0.527. So this negativity means that with the increase in formalization, the innovation will decrease. How much it is going to decrease? 0.527 units. So if formalization is going to increase 1 unit, the innovation is going to decrease 0.527 units. And do not interpret it in percentage. You never interpret your coefficients into percentage. And you always interpret R square into percentage. So make sure you're interpreting it right. So first value is R square, F statistics and its significance. Third is the beta. The last thing that we need to see here is the T statistics in front of this formalization. So if you look at this T value, this is saying minus 9.297. But more importantly here, it is saying 0.000 or 0.000, which means it is definitely less than 0.05. And we are going to say that based on this T statistics and its significance value, we will reject our null hypothesis or accept our alternate hypothesis. In today's research writing techniques, people do not usually go for null hypothesis. Most of the papers and theses that you look at, they do not have the null hypotheses. Therefore, if you have T value which is significant, you can also say that you have accepted your hypothesis. But this actually means that you are accepting your alternate hypothesis, and you are rejecting your null hypothesis. So make sure what we are saying and what we are doing. So what is this? This is a simple regression. Why? Because there was one independent variable with one dependent variable. That is why we got one value of R square, one value of F, one value of beta, one value of T. Now let's go back to this shortcut, linear regression, and put some more variables. If we just put another variable, which is employee creativity, and we are going to run this analysis. Now this time what we are doing the multiple regression analysis. This is a multiple regression. Why? Because there's only one dependent variable with two independent variables. So let's just go and click OK. Now this time it is going to give us some different results. And if you just look at this R square, it has increased because we have given it one more independent variable. So 0.729, which means 72.9% of the innovation is being explained by these two variables, formalization and employee creativity. If we look at this F statistics, we can easily say that it is a significant value because it is less than 0.05. So our model is fit for regression. The same way, if you look at these betas, minus 0.214, which means that when formalization is going to increase, the innovation is going to decrease. The same way, we have a significant value of T statistics in front of formalization. So we are going to reject our null hypothesis or we are going to accept our alternate hypothesis. Now, what about employee creativity? Employee creativity is 0.853 unstandardized coefficient, which is beta. So this says that with 1 unit change in employee creativity, 0.853 units will increase or will change in innovation. In the same way, if we look at these T values and it's significant, it says that it is a very significant value, highly significant. Therefore, we accept the hypothesis. So this is how you actually try and run your regression. And these are the values that we get out of our linear regression. Now, again, the same tip, please do not copy and paste the same tables into your thesis or into your paper. Make separate tables for which you can watch my other video, how to make tables in APA. So always try and make different tables. Now, the last thing that we want to see in SPSS is that the regression line that we saw in our example of percentage of smokers and the years, how can we do it here? So for that, you can go to these graphs, legacy dialog, and scatter plot. So what we've done, we went to graphs, legacy dialog, and scatter plot. So let's just click scatter plot. It asks you what kind of scatter plots do you want. we want a simple one. So now here you can see that it is saying this is what you're going to see. So here it is saying that what kind of variables you want the scatter plot for. So as we can see that formalization is our independent variable and innovation is our dependent variable. Also remember that you when you make a graph, there's a y-axis and there's an x-axis. And in the regression language, you also call uh, y variables as dependent variables and x variables as independent variables. And currently we are only doing it for the simple regression. So let's just click OK. It is going to give you this scatter plot. This is a scatter plot based on formalization and innovation. But how do we get that regression line that we were talking about? So you need to just double click it. So when you double click it, you're going to see this separate window in which you can edit. So you have two methods. One, that you can just click this add fit line add total, or you can also go to this element and fit line add total. So this is going to give you a regression line. So you can use any of these methods to get this regression line fit. Now, one other thing which might not be of your concern, but is going to be very valuable. How can we have a scatter plot of multiple regression? Which means if we want to see the impact of two or more variables on dependent variable, how can we do that? So for that, there's a little complicated process. You go to analyze, regression, linear, and suppose we are going to go with these two variables, and this time you just need to click one more thing, that is save and unstandardized beta. So this is going to save your results. So just click continue and OK. It's going to give you the same results as we got from our multiple regression, but this time what it did to your SPSS window is that it has created another variable which is known as this variable, predicted variable. Now what it has done for you is that it has created values based on these two variables. So if you want to know the fit line, regression fit line of multiple regression, which means of these two variables and their impact on innovation. Now that we have created this variable, we'll go back to our graphs, legacy dialog, scatter plot, simple, define. But this time, what we are going to do is we will be keeping our innovation to dependent variable, and this unstandardized saved values as a product of those two variables in the x-axis, and click OK. Now this scatter plot is based on those two variables, and just click to this element and fit line. Now this line is based on the multiple regression fit line, and you can also say that it is also talking about that it's a linear line. So this is how you can do the analysis in SPSS for regression. Next time, in the next video, we will be talking about some.
Thank you very much for watching this, and I sincerely hope that you have picked something. And in just 1 minute, can I invite my brother Ben to just summarize this in just 1 minute? Ben?
Thank you, Joseph. Good morning, everyone. I don't know where to start from on this particular clip, but I think, Joseph, I propose that maybe in the next class, we can run our own estimation and then talk about the numbers which they have walked us through today. Anyone can come up with any data set or whatever analysis table, and then we try to repeat the interpretation of what was being mentioned here today. But if you just drag this clip a little bit to the results table, there are two things maybe I just wanted to add. There was a results table somewhere. Okay. I think these were all mentioned here. R squared, what it stands for, the variation in your dependent variable because of the joint variation in your independent variables. Now, people are always asking, what is R and adjusted R? Exactly the same explanation. The difference here is adjusted R is this value you always keep getting as you increase the number of independent variables in your estimation, meaning that actually adjusted R, if you kept doing so, can even be negative. The more independent variables you add, the smaller it becomes. They are punishing you for adding more independent variables because that the limitation which should also relate to your theory as you estimate. The F value, I think you talked very well about that, or the statistic is, it's just this number is showing how significant, how jointly significant your independent variables are in explaining your dependent variable, and the higher value with a smaller significance or p-value is what you're always shooting for. Standardized versus unstandardized coefficients. These are the same issues that you can see their variation is in terms of the values. For formalization is minus 2.14, for standardized is become minus 2.06. Direction is still the same, magnitude changes. The difference here is we are always shooting for standardized for comparative reasons. You may have two variables. Formalization is measured in maybe kilometers, and then employees measured maybe in, I'm just using hypothetical things in kilograms. And those two units are not the same. So if you're interpreting them in their original units, you will be looking at unstandardized coefficients. But if you want to compare and make these two variables comparable by removing the deviations, that's where the standardization comes in. You are trying to put into perspective that, okay, these two, while they are measured differently, can easily be explained in this analysis for the same reason. So, and we standardize the coefficients. You are just accounting for the errors or variations or deviations that may come up. T value, I think you also talked about it. This is just T, for instance, minus 0.57 is the number of standard deviations your coefficient is away from zero. Remember, we get this as T minus 0 over standard deviation for that deviation. And then significance in other statistical packages, you will see this as p-values. A p-value or level of significance, it has so many interpretations, but I'll take the common one. A p-value or level of significance, or whatever you want to call it, it is the smallest evidence available for you to reject the null hypothesis. That's probably the easiest option on interpretation of a p-value of significance is, meaning, and in the language of interpretation of significance, we either reject the null hypothesis or fail to reject the null. So the acceptance language has since been stopped. You are either rejecting the null or you are failing to reject the null. So you are looking for the significance. You are looking for any smaller evidence so that you can reject your null hypothesis. And that's what the p-value usually takes us for. And for the t-value, we just get by dividing the standard coefficient with its standard error. That's how we get the significance. For instance, minus or 5.829, you just get 1.179 divided by 0.202 should give you that a number. That's why I said it is the number of standard deviations your coefficient is away from 0. I guess that's what I can mention, but we can carry this to the next class, Joseph, with our own example. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bernard. And I buy into the idea that we have a practical class next Sunday as a follow-up into this, so that maybe I'm aware that very many people are familiar with this, but then also I'm aware there are some people who may be like me and they need some reminder on how these things should be run and interpreted. I see questions here, but because of time, we may not be able to address them, but we'll carry them on to the next class. We have already entered into the next session by 5 minutes. We are really very sorry, but I wouldn't want to move beyond this. Allow me now invite Dr. Ahmad. I guess, Dr. Ahmad, are you on?
Yes,
Doctor,
I'm
okay.
on. Just
So we are sorry we've overshot. Kindly apologies. Please take over now.
all right. Thank you very much. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, members. I would like to appreciate Joseph and the team and Bernard for taking us through the first session, the first 1 hour of the PhD symposium, learning, interpretation, and the analysis of data. I think that is very, very critical stage at the PhD level that we need to give that attention. Allow me also to appreciate those who have been able to participate in a number of activities regarding the PhD work. That is core and important. To students, both local and international, will come to our Sunday sessions. These sessions are largely sessions that where we learn free of charge. We share our experiences and we enable you move. On behalf of the team, we appreciate the commitment of all members from elsewhere in the world for their active participation. Allow me sincerely appreciate Professor Joseph Untai, who has been the team leader and the person behind the platform for the last 2 years. Professor Untai has enabled us to engage into a number of these activities and support many to move on. Allow me to appreciate other senior colleagues, those who are not on the platform currently, and those who are also online for their commitment. These people are very, very important, and they have a lot of work and backlog, but they give in this time every Sunday to be with you. Dr. Gideon, thank you. We appreciate your commitment. Professor Picho Abdubukar. Professor Picho was our last presenter last Sunday. Professor Picho is the Deputy Vice Chancellor, Admin of Moni University, Professor James Kagari. Thank you very much for being with us. Professor Rola Orobia, she's always on each and every Sunday, and she has never missed even a single day. Professor Rola, thank you for that commitment amidst your tight schedule. Allow me also appreciate the active students, not only active, but students who are our senior colleagues on the platform. They've been able to make presentation, they've been able to make the platform move. Joseph, Erasu, Bernard, Sylvia, Amerit, and many others. They have been trying as much as possible to ensure that they, whether there are issues or not, Charles or Lupot, they will endeavor that the program goes on amidst those challenges. So we thank you. We appreciate all our students from the international community, those from Nairobi University, the Kenya universities, those from Tanzania universities, those from South African universities, especially Zimbabwe, those from West African universities, especially Nigeria and North African universities, especially Egypt, for their attendance and being online ever. And rather from the Asian community, we appreciate you. We thank you, and we think that you have given us some good support in that line. Today's sessions, we have one of our own who is going to be discussing audio, giving us the presentation on his work from the beginning up to the end. And this is none other than Joshua. Joshua is defending his work soon, so he has requested that he should be able to present his work here so that we can give him comments and enable him prepare for his final defense. Professor, I would request, I don't know whether Professor will be able, I'll request Professor Ntai and Professor Picho, if they can be able to be online, to be the main people to look into his work, and Dr. Gideon, and then give him questions at the end. I hopefully, I would think that Joshua is on. He has been able to hear the few challenges in logging on, but I think he should be on by now. He should be on by now. I just need to check on him whether he has other challenges, but okay. Joseph,
Dr. Orgembe, I'm online.
You're online.
Yes, sir.
Okay, you Joseph. Sorry. We are going to give you. We are giving you 45 minutes of presentation. Please share your screen, and you'll be given 45 minutes. Then after that, Professor Ntai, Dr. Gideon, and Dr. Picho will engage you. And later we shall invite other professors, including Professor Rola, to give you comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. My name is Joshua Mandre, and I'm here to present my PhD public defense on the topic, the adoption of management controls in Uganda's manufacturing sector. And this will be the structure of my presentation. I will start with the background to the study, followed by the theoretical foundation, the methodology, then the study findings, and I will end with the discussion and the conclusion chapter. Now, in a dynamic environment, the need to gain enhanced performance is crucial. Many firms succeed in this attempt by embracing mechanisms that guide employee behavior and decisions towards profit maximization. These mechanisms include systems, practices, rules, values, and other activities that ensure that the behavior and decisions of the employees towards the farm's profit objective. And this enables the farm to thrive as opposed to surviving. And this is ably demonstrated by the success story titled Maximizing Profit. Mr. X watched his 3 elder sisters die for lack of medical care. One sister died while giving birth, the other 2 died of HIV-related illness. Mr. X then found out HIV was common. 1.5 million out of 30 million Ugandans then were HIV positive. And just like HIV, malaria killed 300 people a day. Mr. X, who is an economist, then saw an opportunity to manufacture and sell drugs. So in 1997, Mr. X and his 5 partners each contributed $5,000 to start Company B. They registered the company and hired technical people to manage the business. In the first year, Company B had sales of $1 million, though patented medicines were expensive. In 2001, the World Trade Organization allowed only least developed countries to manufacture generic drugs. So Company B was able to manufacture and sell antiretrovirals and antimalarials to the Ugandan market. In 2005, the Company bid to supply the Global Fund, but as per the inspection report, their ARVs were not certified by the World Health Organization. Company B lacked an adequately documented pharmaceutical quality system. Production and control operations were not specified in written form, and good manufacturing practice requirements were generally not followed. Managerial responsibilities were not specified in job descriptions. There was no clear separation of management roles, and the report also showed that the organization chart was unavailable. Mr. X then decided, sorry, I cannot see some part of my screen just a bit. Thank you, sorry. Mr. X then decided to identify a company with experience in manufacture of ARVs to guide Company B in improving its systems and procedures. With the help of the Ugandan government, Company B entered into an agreement with Company A as a 51% shareholder for $30 million, forming a new company, AB. The government then offered a 10-year tax holiday and a guarantee to purchase the drugs. Company AB constructed a $32 million plant, appointed 5 board members, a chief executive officer, and a finance manager. Staff were sent to Company A's head office. The returnees trained other staff in the new procedures. Company AB also introduced an enterprise resource planning system that integrated information from departments and linked to suppliers, an annual budget with quarterly performance reviews, and then encouraged staff to suggest ways of improving processes in their areas of work. As a result, in 2015, the second World Health Organization report certified Company AB, making them the only company in sub-Saharan Africa that is authorized to manufacture antiretroviral drugs. So sales in 2018 to 19 countries in Africa were $62.7 million, with the profits of $12.6 million, and Company AB was also listed on the Uganda Securities Exchange. So Houston et al. 2015 advises that success stories like this can be replicated in other areas. And thus we need theoretical explanations for this success story. So the lessons we can learn is that Company AB was able to maximize profit by, amongst others, entering formal contracts with its employees, specifying each party's role, benchmarking best practices from Company A, and complying with World Health Organization requirements. And also we can see that the local interactions that emerged between the employees, management, and Company A staff enabled them to come up with new procedures. So the actions undertaken by Company AB in order to be able to maximize profit require theoretical explanations. And we have 3 theories that explain how Company AB was able to maximize its profit. The first is agency theory, which posits that firms develop management controls in a bid to become efficient and maximize profit. So we can see that from our success story that Company AB carried out performance reviews quarterly to see how they were performing in terms of the budget and how the profit they were making, and then seeing the gaps and finding ways to improve their operations. And this enabled them to become more profitable. However, agency theory pays limited attention to the environment in which the firm operates. So it ignores the context in which the agency relationship is enacted. And thus, to improve on these arguments, we turn to institutional theory, which actually ignores efficiency concerns and focuses more on how a manufacturing firm can actually gain legitimacy amongst its stakeholders and thus enable them to access resources. Because you can see from our success story that the World Health Organization required actually company B to first be certified. And so company B had to actually turn to a more successful company, which was company A, which had experience in manufacture of ARVs and replicated their systems. And this enabled the certification of a key stakeholder, which was World Health Organization. And this allowed them to gain access to the license to supply the Global Fund through the government of Uganda. So the challenge with the institutional theory is that its focus on homogenization then doesn't enable it to explain how a firm's structures and processes change. So to improve on these arguments, we turn to complexity theory, which actually posits that firms spontaneously self-organize into ordered forms in order to adapt to their environments. So we can see that the interactions between the staff of company A and B enable them to introduce new procedures, because the staff of company B actually went to the offices of company A and learned the processes and procedures that are used by company A in producing ARVs, and these were brought back and they trained the staff, and this enabled them to come up with new procedures. However, complexity theories focus on spontaneity, then limits its ability in terms of long-term prediction. So complexity theory actually focuses more on spontaneous interactions. So the opportunity in this study was that we can see that the adoption of management controls by company AB can be explained by agency, institutional, as well as complexity theory. So from agency theory, we draw the concept of agency relations, which explains how to determine the optimal contract, which contains mechanisms that can guide staff towards achieving the firm's profit objective. And then from institutional theory, we draw the concept of institutional isomorphism, which explains the similarity in management controls adopted by firms within the manufacturing sector. And from complexity theory, we draw on the concept of self-organization, which explains how new practices arise from local interactions between the staff of company A and B. So the opportunity then in this study was to combine these variables to develop a theoretical model that explains the adoption of management controls. In terms of the knowledge gap, theoretically, we can see that previous studies employed various theories singly to explain the adoption of management controls. So we can see some of the theories they employed were agency, institutional, complexity, contingency, structuration, transaction cost economics, stewardship, as well as the new institutional two-stage model of diffusion. However, Hawk et al. 2013 advised us that there is no single theory that has a monopoly on explanations of accounting and organizational phenomena, as each theory has its own virtue. So they actually advise us to combine these theories in order to come up with better explanations of accounting and organizational phenomena, which this study did. And empirically, we can see that previous studies used variables such as the integrated financial management system as a tool of management control in local governments in Uganda, the compatibility of organizational culture and management control innovations, environmental heterogeneity, as well as leadership characteristics. However, these studies paid less emphasis on agency relations, institutional isomorphism, self-organization, and the mediating role of institutional isomorphism, which this study sought out to address. And thus, the purpose of this study was to examine the associations between agency relations, institutional isomorphism, self-organization, and the adoption of management controls. This study was also guided by the central research question, which stated, what is the understanding of adoption of management controls by manufacturing firms? And this was the theoretical framework that guided this study. Our dependent variable was the adoption of management controls, which means how a manufacturing firm identifies, acquires, and then uses mechanisms such as systems, rules, values, practices, and other activities that guide the behavior and decisions of employees towards the firm's profit objective. From agency theory, we drew upon the variable of agency relations, which is an employment relationship whereby a manager acting on behalf of a manufacturing firm hires an employee to perform certain tasks for predefined rewards. And then from institutional isomorphism, we drew upon the variable of from institutional theory, we drew upon the variable of institutional isomorphism, which is how forces that compel a manufacturing firm to adopt practices that are prevalent within that manufacturing sector. And from complexity theory, we had the variable self-organization, which is how a manufacturing firm reorganizes its internal patterns of operation in reaction to changes in the environment. And thus we had 5 direct hypotheses and 2 indirect hypotheses. So when it came to methodology, the philosophical foundation was based on critical realism, whereby ontologically we consider management controls to be both a structured and an unstructured reality. Structured in the sense that management controls actually operate independently of the individuals who operate in them. So you see people preparing reports, making budgets, carrying out training and development of the staff, even people eating in a staff canteen. However, their interpretation of what these management controls actually are supposed to do is
I have lost Joseph. Is the problem on my side? I've lost Joseph. Is the problem on my side?
I think we have all lost him. Initially, he had the network challenges. Let's hope that maybe he will be able to get back.
Okay, thank you.
Hope it doesn't happen on the final day.
Practicing for that.
You might have to get a better place.
Let's just try to get in touch with him and see what's happening. Then we communicate.
Chair, I'm back on. I'm sorry for the interruption. I had a problem with the network. Hello?
Yes, Joshua, you can go on. The chair seems to have also some network interruptions here and there, but
okay, I don't know where I lost you, where you lost me.
You are explaining your conceptual framework.
Oh, the conceptual framework. Okay. Thank you very much.
He was on the methodology. He had presented the philosophical stance.
Yes.
That's where he was.
Yeah.
The slide before this.
Okay.
First, go back to the slide before this.
Yes.
Can I proceed?
That's where you were.
Thank you very much, Professor Rabia. I was indicating that this study employed a cross-sectional sequential explanatory research design, whereby the study collected quantitative data, analyzed it separately, and then collected qualitative data, analyzed it separately. And these findings were then merged to come up with themes that explain the adoption of management controls. The study population was 246 large manufacturing firms, following Uganda Investment Authority's definition of a large manufacturing firm in Uganda to be one that has employees over 100 people and has revenues over 360 million Uganda shillings. For the sample size and design, this study drew upon the entire population from the Uganda Manufacturers Association 2018 member database in order to account for a possible low response rate, which is common in studies of management control, and also to ensure that we achieve the statistical bar value of 0.8 when it comes to hypothesis testing. The data collection instruments were a self-administered questionnaire for the quantitative phase and a semi-structured interview guide. And following Ngoma et al. 2013, in order to increase responsiveness and reduce selection bias, this study targeted 3 heads of department per firm, and the response rate we were able to achieve was 202 firms, representing 83% of the sample size, which is adequate for structural equation modeling. When it came to bias, this study controlled for 3 forms of bias. The first was a common method bias, which is bias that is introduced within the study data as a result of the measurement method and not the items per se. So part of the measures this study undertook to reduce this kind of bias was, first of all, procedure, by first of all domesticating the measures to suit the study context. For example, simplifying the language and also avoiding, for example, double-barreled questions. And then we also protected respondent anonymity and got clearance from the Dean of the Faculty of Graduate Studies and Research, which provided confidence to the respondents so that they could openly and confidently answer the questions. And some studies have indicated actually this increases the response rate. Then after we had collected the data to check if we had minimized this kind of bias, we carried out a statistical test following COC 2015, whereby we checked for the inner variance inflation factors. And if the scores are actually below 3.3, then common method bias shouldn't be a worry in this study, and this was achieved. When it came to endogeneity, this study controlled for farm factors, which previous studies have indicated influenced the farm's decision to adopt management controls. This include employee number, subsector, farm age, as well as sales volume, or what you call turnover. Then for non-response bias, this study carried out a partial least squares multi-group analysis for both early and late respondents, and the results were non-significant, suggesting that non-response bias was actually not a concern within this study. Then when it came to data management, we used the SPSS version 22 to check for errors, missing values, and the absence of outliers, which can sometimes bias the regression. And then we carried out a measurement model assessment in partial least squares to see if the items we were using to measure the variables were actually both reliable and valid. And the results indicate that actually we met all the suggested cutoffs. And then since we were going to use we're going to check for associations with the study variables. We need to check if the data met parametric assumptions of both normality, linearity, homogeneity of variance, as well as the absence of multicollinearity. And this was achieved within this study data. And also check to see if the correlations between with the hypothesis testing. So for the hypothesis testing, we used partial least squares as opposed to covariance-based structural equation modeling, because here you can run multiple predictor variables, as well as the testing of indirect relationships within a single model, as opposed to covariance-based structural equation modeling, where you have to run several models and see which one best fits the data. So we use a software called Partial Least Squares, version 3, Smart PLS, and we are able to develop the following structural model for the adoption of management controls. As you can see, our independent variables are self-organization, agency relations, and institutional isomorphism, all predicting the adoption of management controls. And the only non-significant path coefficient was actually the one between self-organization here and the adoption of management controls. When it came to the control variables, the only significant one was actually turnover, which suggests that actually identifying, acquiring, and then using management controls is actually expensive because, for example, if you want to install an ERP system, you have to pay thousands of dollars, which might be expensive for Ugandan manufacturing firms. So I then move on to see if the structural model that we had developed was actually robust enough to support the results we have got. So I carried out a structural model assessment. And the first metric I looked at was the coefficient of determination. As you can see in this study, the R square is 0.675. So suggesting that agency relations, institutional isomorphism, and self-organization predict 67.5% of the variance within the adoption of management controls. And then analogous to the path coefficients is the F squared, which indicates the amount of contribution each independent variable has in explaining the variance in the dependent variable. And we see that agency relations contributes the majority of the variance, followed by institutional isomorphism, and finally by self-organization.
I'm not seeing the statistics you're talking about. Is it on my side?
I think it is on my
yes,
side.
Doctor,
Sorry
right.
about
I
that.
think
But
hyperlinks are
because
not
of
working.
time, please allow me to proceed.
Joshua.
And, yes?
Joshua.
Yes?
Please check your hyperlinks are not working.
I'll check that. Chair, can I proceed because of time?
No.
No, eh?
How can we help you if we are not seeing anything?
Okay, my apologies. Let me.
What you can do is maybe you unshare this and share the results.
Okay,
I thought we are here to help you.
Oh,
and
thank
you're
you.
just rushing.
Sorry, I was following the chair's guidance. I apologize, Professor Robia. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. So I'll go back. The structural model assessment, I looked at several metrics. For example, I've talked about the R square. And if you look at the R square for this study, it indicates that agency relations, institutional isomorphism, and self-organization predict 67.5% of the variance in the adoption of management controls. And analogous to the path coefficients is the F square, which indicates the amount of variance explained by the independent variables in the dependent variable. And this shows that agency relations, institutional isomorphism, and self-organization, agency relations explains the majority of the variance in the adoption of management controls, followed by institutional isomorphism, and then finally by self-organization. Then, since partial least squares is an interplay between prediction and explanation, this study also sought to see if the structural model actually had any predictive relevance by looking at Stone and Gazer's Q-squared values. And if you have values squares above 0, then your model actually has predictive relevance. And we can see that agency relations, institutional isomorphism, all the scores are above 0, suggesting that actually our structural model has predictive relevance. Allow me now to move. Sorry, the technology is giving me a bit of a challenge, and thank you for your support because now I'm seeing some of the errors in my work. I'm going to just restart the slide. I then proceeded to qualitative data analysis, and the sampling procedure was purposive sampling as I was looking for managers who had actually experience in identifying, acquiring, and then using management controls. In terms of reliability and validity during the qualitative data collection analysis, I sought to establish a trustworthiness of the research results by ensuring credibility of the data and then transferability of the analysis to see if they can be transferred to another context were the analysis dependable, were they consistent, and then conformability, were the analysis actually believable. And then when it came to theoretical saturation, this was achieved at 8 firms, whereby no new stories or themes were emerging within the data. That's when I stopped collecting qualitative data. And the data analysis followed theoretical thematic analysis, whereby the data was coded based on the theoretical framework that was guiding this study, using steps outlined in Goya et al. 2012, who advised that first you create first order codes, whereby you collect phrases that are similar, group them together, and then the next step is to create what we call second order themes, whereby you distill these first order codes, and then you come up with second order themes, and finally you distill these second order themes to come up with an aggregated dimension as illustrated by the following data structure for the adoption of management controls. Having finalized data collection and analysis, I now go ahead to present the results. I'll start with the organization characteristics. As we can see here, our unit of analysis was a manufacturing firm, and the majority of the firms were actually aged more than 10 years, suggesting that they had experience in identifying, acquiring, and then using management controls. Most of the firms were drawn from the agro-processing sector.
Joshua,
which suggests that Uganda depends a lot on the industry,
Joshua, please check
the
the
agricultural
hyperlinks.
sector. Sorry?
Check the hyperlinks still. They are not working.
They're not working, huh? Let
you
me
can open
share
file
this
by
one.
file.
Can you see that, Chair?
Not yet.
Yes, here we are. Sorry. Yes, I was talking about the characteristics of the organizations, and we can see that the majority of the firms are actually aged over 10 years, suggesting that they have actually experience in identifying, acquiring, and using management controls. The majority of the firms were based in the agro-processing, or what you call food processing sector, which is indicative of Uganda's reliance on the agricultural sector. And most of the firms were actually owned by Ugandans. When it came to the unit of inquiry, these were the characteristics of our respondents. It was 50% male, 50% female, roughly. And the majority of the respondents were actually born after 1980, indicative of the youthfulness of Uganda's population. Most of the managers actually had at least a university diploma or a degree in terms of education level, so they could understand the questions that were posed to them by this study. And the majority, in terms of tenure, had been in their job for over 5 years, which means they had experience in identifying, acquiring, and then using management controls.
We are not seeing the figures. Just we are not seeing the figures.
Okay, I think there's a problem with my hyperlinks. I apologize. Let me reshare this. Can you see them now?
Yes.
My apologies. I'll have to redo this again. Those are the figures. Would you like me to repeat them?
Please.
Yes. Okay. So you can see that in terms of the gender, it was roughly 50% male, roughly 50% female, and the majority of the firms of the respondents were born after 1980, and then most of them, in terms of education, had at least a university degree or a diploma, and they had been in the job more than 5 years, so they had experience actually in identifying, acquiring, and using management controls. And then move on to the key informants at the quantitative phase of the study. The majority, they were drawn from various departments, procurement, finance, sales, marketing, and we even had an owner manager who had over 30 years experience in identifying, acquiring, and then using management controls. And they were taken from various subsectors, including packaging, agro-processing, beverages, and others. I then move ahead to the quantitative results. And now, since in this study we used the bootstrap, I will use the 95% confidence intervals to interpret the results. And if you have a 0 in between the confidence intervals, then this hypothesis is not supported. So if we look at our direct effects here, hypothesis 1 to hypothesis 5.
Joshua, still the hyperlinks. Open those files one by one.
My apologies, Chair.
Open
so
the
as you can
files
see,
one by one. Okay.
Hypothesis 3, the path between self-organization to the adoption of management controls has a 0, and even the empirical t-value is below 1.96, which is suggested for two-tailed hypothesis testing, is below the cutoff of 1.96. And if you see the p-value, it is above 0.05. So this hypothesis 3 was rejected. The rest of the direct were supported. When it came to the indirect effects, the one and only test, according to Zhao 2010, for the existence of a mediation relationship is a significant indirect effect. They advise that actually the next step then is to use Baroda and Kenny's 1996 criteria to interpret then the type of mediation that you've obtained. So if you see hypothesis 6, the indirect effect between agency relations to institutional isomorphism and finally to adoption of management controls is significant. And also if you look at hypothesis 1, the direct effect between agency relations and adoption of management controls is also significant. This indicates that we have complementary partial mediation because they are positive and moving in the same direction. When it came to hypothesis 7, we can see that the indirect effect between self-organization to institutional isomorphism and finally to adoption of management controls is significant. However, the path between for hypothesis 3 between self-organization to the adoption of management controls is non-significant, which means that self-organization cannot directly lead to the adoption of management controls, but must go through institutional isomorphism, meaning that we have what we call a full mediation. I then move on to the quantitative results. I then move on to the quantitative results, and this answers actually our central research question, that what is the understanding of adoption of management controls by manufacturing firms. So manufacturing firms indicated that, first of all, identifying, acquiring, and then using management controls enables them to actually identify, first of all, the company objective, which for some firms is to maximize profits, others it's the perpetual success of the business, others for them, they understood it as the ability to survive as a business or keep the business as a going concern. Then the adoption of management controls helps them to achieve the company objective, for example, by putting in place an organizational structure, making plans, preparing reports, having tools and tactics, having a proper management team, or coming up with an organization strategy. So this answers how manufacturing firms understand the adoption of management controls. Having presented the results, allow me then to move on to discuss them. And I will follow the following pattern. It will be based on emerging themes. I will start with the supported hypothesis, followed by the unsupported hypothesis, and then I will end on with the indirect relationships. In this study, hypothesis 1 stated that there exists a relationship between agency relations and the adoption of management controls. So in this study, agency relations is actually an employment relationship where a manager acting on behalf of a manufacturing firm hires an employee to perform certain tasks for predefined rewards. These rewards can include, for example, being paid a salary or a commission or bonuses. And the adoption of management controls is how a manufacturing firm identifies, acquires, and then uses mechanisms that are meant to direct and guide employee behavior and decisions towards the firm's profit objective. These mechanisms can include systems, rules, values, practices, and any other activities. So I will discuss this. I'll discuss this hypothesis using two themes. The first is that self-driven rewards simplifies the use of management controls. So a manufacturing firm where the staff are compensated based on predetermined targets. This can include, for example, how many kilos of tea you've plucked or cases of soda that you have sold, are likely to use contingent payments such as bonuses and commissions or even overtime to achieve their objectives. Secondly, a manufacturing firm where remuneration consists of performance-based payments, such as these bonuses and commissions, will use a performance measurement system, such as a balance scorecard or even a dashboard, to monitor their performance. I will illustrate this using case one, titled Performance-Based Management Control. This is a textile and wearing apparel manufacturer. This company is actually based in Kawempe. And they say that the guys who do sewing, that is where we think we have a winning system. For us, we pay a worker per piece, and each piece has its own rate. So every year, we publish a notice that this year, we're going to be paying these rates. A shirt so much, a short so much, a trouser so much. So we can see here that if you have these self-driven rewards, you know that if I want to earn more, I just need to work more. So you produce more and you earn more. And we know how much to pay you because we know what your output is. This helps you achieve your objective of earning more commissions or more bonuses, and also enables the firm also actually achieve its objective of earning a bigger profit. So this finding is similar to the one of Yu et al. 2020, who established that the performance of online reviewers actually improved after they received a performance-related pay. And our finding lends support to agency theory, which posits that firms use incentive systems such as bonuses to encourage employees to focus on organizational goal achievement. The second theme under hypothesis one is that company rules standardize management control. So we see that in a manufacturing firm where the staff's responsibilities are clearly defined, this can be using a job description or even a work plan, is likely to have policies such as a code of conduct, which informs staff about acceptable behaviors. Secondly, a manufacturing firm where the staff can see the results of their work in terms of, for example, garments, shirts sewn, will have tools that guide how their operations are to be conducted. Let me illustrate this using case two. This is the case of a tea manufacturer based somewhere in Lugazi. This tea manufacturer indicated that for the people who work under me, I have work plans for them. For example, I want stock take done every first day of the month. This gives me time to prepare my report, which I am supposed to submit to the general management by the 7th. So we can see that these guidelines, like this work plan here, ensures that it standardizes the behavior of the employees within the manufacturing firm. So they know what to do and when to do it. So our finding is in line with the one of Kagari, Munena, and Intai, who studied managed performance in public universities in Uganda. And they actually found that by ensuring that staff had job descriptions with attainable expectations, managers actually obtained employee performance. And that's our finding buttresses the arguments of agency theory that behavior-based contracts enable alignment of the interests of the staff with that of the organization. And then move on to hypothesis two, which stated that there exists a relationship between institutional isomorphism and the adoption of management controls. So in this study, institutional isomorphism means forces that compel a manufacturing firm to adopt practices that are prevalent within the manufacturing sector. And the adoption of management controls is how a manufacturing firm identifies, acquires, and then uses mechanisms that guide employee behavior and decisions towards the firm's profit objective. I will discuss this hypothesis using two themes. The first one is that observing regulatory requirements reinforces management control. This is because a manufacturing firm that abides by regulatory requirements, such as the ones of, for example, National Environment Management Authority or maybe Uganda Tea Development Authority, is likely to incorporate such requirements of these regulators in their action plans. Secondly, a manufacturing firm that is subject to periodic reviews by accreditation organizations, such as, for example, Uganda National Bureau of Standards, will have methods for monitoring adherence to the requirements of such accreditation organizations. And this is illustrated by Vignette 1, external guidelines as management control. So the manufacturing firms indicated that the Uganda National Bureau of Standards requires them to do a management review for the International Standard Organization 9001 Quality Management System at least once a year if they are to retain the quality mark. So management together with the staff review minutes from previous assessments and the extent to which objectives and targets were met in the previous year. They also look at external factors such as new laws or regulations from bodies such as National Drug Authority and National Environment Management Authority. as well as changing customer requirements and advances in technology. So this has helped them reduce costs and comply with regulations. So because you need to actually obtain a license to operate from some of these regulatory bodies and the accreditation organizations, you are then going to incorporate their requirements as part of the mechanisms that you use to guide employee behavior and decisions towards the firm's profit objective. So our finding is similar to the one of Bananuka et al. 2019 and Nyahas 2017, who found that actually coercive isomorphism improves online financial reporting by financial services firms in Uganda, and thus will lend support to institutional theory, which asserts that coercive pressures compel organizations to comply with regulatory requirements. The second theme under hypothesis 2 is that learning from the best improves management control. So we see that a manufacturing firm that uses artifacts like other firms, these artifacts are basically the visible parts of an organization's culture. For example, you see them providing staff with uniforms to identify them. They display awards they've won in their reception, or even the products that they manufacture. So this will enable the manufacturing firm to actually communicate its core values to its staff. Secondly, a manufacturing firm's operations that are influenced by what other firms do will be able to develop standards to guide its operations, as illustrated by case 4, titled Learning from the Best. This is a beverages manufacturer. They're based somewhere in Luzira. It's an international company. It's part of a conglomerate headquartered in London. So they indicated that we decided to borrow an online app called the Distributor Management System from our sister company in the United States. We then merged it with another system called Trucks from Coca-Cola. So now within 15 minutes, you can download a report that we used to get after 1 month. So this case clearly illustrates how learning from the best actually improves how you guide your employees' behavior and decisions towards the firm's profit objective, because now they can make decisions much faster because they get information quickly. Our finding is similar to the one of Sadres et al. 2019, who found that actually Ugandan small business enterprises imitate tax compliance behaviors of firms that they perceive to be more successful. And thus, we find support for institutional theory's assertion that new ideas can be implemented when firms emulate others. We then move on to hypothesis 4, which posted that there exists a relationship between agency relations and institutional isomorphism. This was also supported. And just to remind you that in this study, agency relations is an employment relationship where a manager acting on behalf of a manufacturing firm hires an employee to perform certain tasks for predefined rewards, such as a salary. And institutional isomorphism in this study meant forces that compel a manufacturing firm to adopt practices that are prevalent within the manufacturing sector. I will use one theme to discuss this finding, this hypothesis. And it says that regulating staff's behavior necessitates adherence to industry norms. So we see that a manufacturing firm with the ability to precisely define how their staff perform their tasks, such as using a day route for the sales staff, will benchmark its policies with other firms. Secondly, a manufacturing firm that can objectively measure the work done by their staff in terms of their output. For example, how many liters of milk they've sold, will adhere to guidelines provided by regulatory bodies, such as, for example, the Uganda Manufacturers Association. I will illustrate this using a vignette 2 titled Relying on Industry Norms. So the manufacturing firms have put in place policies, procedures, and processes that ensure that their operations are in line with the actions of similar firms in the sector. For example, in the tea subsector, a worker must pluck 2 leaves and a bud. That is a standard and is global. So this has been incorporated in the firm's procedures and forms part of the training for the staff, as well as their performance appraisal, such that supervisors monitor the quality of tea picked based on this standard. The remuneration is also based on the kilos of tea plucked by the worker. So this study found actually that in one farm was able to increase the price it got at the auction in Mombasa from 0.8 cents to 2.2 US dollars per kilo, which is an over 200% increase in revenue. So this has ensured that the farms remain competitive within the market. So this vignette clearly illustrates that if you want to regulate the behavior of your staff, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but look at the expected behaviors within the manufacturing sector and then incorporate these as part of your management controls. And so our finding is similar to the one of Bele 2010, who actually found that isomorphic processes increase the probability that an organization adopts performance-related pay provisions. And thus our finding lends support to institutional theory, which posits that industry traditions play an important role in determining organizational policies. We then move on to hypothesis 5, which posted that there exists a relationship between self-organization and institutional isomorphism. This hypothesis was supported as well. And in this study, self-organization means the ability of a manufacturing firm to reorganize its internal patterns of operation in reaction to changes in the environment. And institutional isomorphism means forces that compel a manufacturing firm to adopt practices that are prevalent within the manufacturing sector. I will use two themes to discuss this hypothesis. The first one is that interactions enable compliance. So a manufacturing firm which encourages its staff to openly share information, for example, by sending emails to each other or participating in face-to-face discussions, will adhere to regulatory requirements such as the ones of, say, the Capital Markets Authority. And then a manufacturing firm where there's continuous communication amongst the staff, for example, participating in WhatsApp groups or even reading what is posted on the bulletin board at the entrance to the firm, will be able to develop new practices, as illustrated by case 6, interactions as an enabler. This firm deals in construction materials. They're based somewhere in Kajansi. The firm indicated that when we applied for a listing on the Uganda Securities Exchange, we were required to conform to 26 listing rules and regulations. So management put together a team of experts to prepare for the initial public offer. The team would regularly meet and talk through the process, which helped management understand what was needed. So this firm, you can see that we were given 26 rules and regulations, which are onerous. And since it was their first time to do it, they could not understand it. However, when they came together and started having discussions, they were then able to understand what was required of them by the Securities Exchange. And this actually enabled them to be able to include this as part of their management controls, and thus they were successfully listed on the Securities Exchange. Actually, this was the first firm to be listed on the Uganda Securities Exchange in 2001. Our finding is similar to the one of Bui and De Villiers 2017, who found that besides formal meetings, top managers used various channels such as newsletters and face-to-face discussions to communicate carbon emission management expectations and change their firm's environmental strategy. And thus we lend support to institutional theory, which asserts that to complexity theory, which asserts that the repeated patterns of interaction between agents as they co-evolve generate new forms or behaviors. I then move on to the second theme and hypothesis 5, that resourcefulness facilitates benchmarking. So we see that a manufacturing firm which encourages innovativeness, for example, coming up with new products, is likely to emulate other firms' actions. Secondly, a manufacturing firm that seeks to continuously renew itself, maybe installing new operating systems or, for example, an ERP system, will seek to learn from other firms, because these firms have actually done this before. So there's no need to reinvent the wheel. Look at them, look at your operations and see the gap, and then incorporate their best practices as a part of yours. As you can see from our success story of company B, they looked at a more successful company from India, company A, which had experience in manufacturing ARVs, and they incorporated their best practices as part of their practices. And this enabled them actually to be certified by the World Health Organization. So our finding is similar to the one of Key 2020, who found that highly motivated staff are willing to learn from other success to improve their government's quality of services. So we find support for institutional theory's assertion that firms unconsciously innovate by modeling themselves on organizations which they perceive to be more successful. I then move on to the unsupported hypothesis, which was hypothesis 3, which posits that there exists a relationship between self-organization and the adoption of management controls. So self-organization in this study is the ability to reorganize your internal patterns of operation in reaction to changes in the environment. And adoption of management controls is how a manufacturing firm identifies, acquires, and then uses mechanisms that guide employee behavior and decisions towards the firm's profit objective. So this result was non-significant and positive, indicating that there was actually self-organization occurring, but not in levels that are significant enough or significant enough. So this it means that a firm's ability to rearrange its patterns of operation to implement mechanisms for guiding employee behavior is actually influenced by top management. Because in this, the literature had actually indicated that this self-organization is supposed to occur as a bottom-up process. The interactions by the staff at the bottom of the organization are supposed to come, they are supposed to enable the development of new procedures, which then become part of their management controls. However, we realize that these new behaviors emerge as a result of guidance from management and not from the individuals at the bottom of the pyramid in the organization per se. And this actually is illustrated by case 4. This was a plastics manufacturer based on Bombo Road, somewhere around Maganjo. So they indicated that employees are very funny if they're not handled well and you do not involve them in decision making. Actually, employees will always get the worst approach to your method. It will always be tougher than what you think. So management actually has a role in guiding how change actually occurs within the manufacturing firm. So Smith and Comer similarly find that in order to help a group clinging to obsolete behavior, a change agent must encourage staff to experiment in order to generate more adaptive processes. So our finding that there is lack of self-organization occurring in manufacturing firms actually is in contrast to the finding of Meke et al., who found actually evidence of self-organization occurring in savings and credit cooperative organizations in Uganda. However, this could be because Meke's study, or et al.'s study, was actually in a different sector, which has a different operating context. However, still, our finding lends support to complexity theory, which posits that actually for self-organization to occur in organizations, it actually requires constant attention, support, and resources, as we've found. Allow me then to move to the indirect relationships. The first is hypothesis 6, which posits that institutional isomorphism mediates the relationship between agency relations and adoption of management controls. This was a partial mediation because agency relations could lead directly to the adoption of management controls. And at the same time, this relationship can be enhanced if agency relations goes through institutional isomorphism. So we find that firms that use contingent pay, such as bonuses and commissions, will follow industry norms in order to enable them motivate their employees. So secondly, a manufacturing firm that encourages minimal staff supervision will use artifacts that are similar to other firms in order to communicate its core values to the staff. This relationship is illustrated by matrix 2, showing the mediating role of institutional isomorphism between agency relations and adoption of management controls. So we see that a manufacturing firm can create an agency relationship in terms of following company rules, providing self-driven rewards, and using a give and take supervision style, which will lead to the adoption of management controls and enable them achieve the company objective or even motivate the employees. At the same time, this relationship can be enhanced when a manufacturing firm creates an agency relationship in terms of following company rules, providing self-driven rewards, and a give and take supervision style, which will lead to institutional isomorphism in terms of complying with external requirements, learning from the best, and embracing expected behaviors, which will enable the firm to adopt management controls. So our finding is similar to the one of Young et al. 2000, who used both agency and institutional theories to find that both board independence and institutional pressures influence the board's decision to adopt a formal chief executive officer evaluation process. And thus, we find support for agency theory's assertion that the operating environment influences the nature of the contract between principal and agent. The final hypothesis in this study was hypothesis 7, which stated that institutional isomorphism mediates the relationship between self-organization and adoption of management controls. This was a full mediation because a manufacturing firm can actually not self-organize in order to adopt management controls, but this must be through institutional isomorphism. So a manufacturing firm which encourages regular communication amongst its staff while complying with regulatory requirements will then be able to develop procedures to guide its operations. Secondly, a manufacturing firm which encourages innovativeness is likely to emulate other firms' actions to achieve the company objective. I will illustrate this using matrix 2, showing the mediating role of institutional isomorphism between self-organization and the adoption of management controls. So we see that a manufacturing firm actually cannot self-organize directly to lead to the adoption of management controls, but it must self-organize in terms of creating a proactive environment for its staff, enabling information sharing and the development of new procedures, which will then lead to institutional isomorphism.
You're not seeing your matrix.
Oh, apologies. Let me share it. So we can see the firm self-organizing in terms of creating a proactive environment, enabling information sharing and the development of new procedures, which will lead to institutional isomorphism in terms of complying with external requirements, learning from the best, and then embracing expected behaviors within the manufacturing subsector, which will enable the manufacturing firm to adopt management controls. So our finding is similar to the one of Sainagi et al. 2019, who found that Livigno region, which is in Italy, used the balance scorecard, which is a management control mechanism, to benchmark its products with the neighboring holiday destinations in Italy to develop a new product called a holiday destination package. And our finding is lends support to complexity theory, which posits that firms that can reconfigure their structures and resources are then able to support action. I then move on to the conclusions of this study, and they are threefold. The first one is that establishing agency relations enables the achievement of the firm's objectives. So we see that a manufacturing firm that can precisely define how staff do their jobs will do so using guidelines such as standard operating procedures, action plans, or even a job description. Secondly, a manufacturing firm that can objectively measure the work done by its employees, such as sales of cans of, say, soda or kilos of tea plucked, will remunerate them based on this performance. And thirdly, a manufacturing firm which can observe how workers go about their duties will evaluate their work through direct supervision of their behaviors and decisions. And the second conclusion is that responding to institutional isomorphic pressure expands the adoption of management controls. This is because a manufacturing firm that learns best practices from others can understand how management controls operate. So the manufacturing firm will actually benchmark its operations with that of more successful firms and then incorporate the best practices from those firms as part of their management controls. Then a manufacturing firm that embraces industry norms, the expected behaviors within the manufacturing sector, will then observe policies that guide such actions. And thirdly, a manufacturing firm that complies with the regulatory requirements, such as the ones of the Ministry of Trade and Industry or Uganda Manufacturers Association, will incorporate such requirements in its operations. The third conclusion is that the rearrangement of operation patterns based on similar firms facilitates the adoption of management controls. So a manufacturing firm that wishes to be resourceful, if you want to come up, to innovate and come up with new products, new management controls, should adopt systems from more successful firms. Then secondly, interactions within the manufacturing firm in terms of holding meetings, sending emails, having face-to-face discussions, actually enable the decision to adopt normatively sanctioned management controls. And thirdly, the emergence of various management controls in the manufacturing firm results from responding to external forces. For example, requirements of Uganda Revenue Authority or even NSSF or even lenders like banks. And then move on to the theoretical implications of this study, and they are fourfold. The first one is that this study has reaffirmed the importance of linking rewards to outputs in agency theory. We can see that manufacturing firms deal in physical products. So 90% of the staff actually can see what they've done. So a key tenet of agency theory is that if you know what someone's output is, pay them based on that. And this study has established that. And that's what manufacturing firms actually do. And then secondly, normative, mimetic, and coercive mechanisms actually play a complementary role in fostering the adoption of management controls. These mechanisms actually work in tandem. They don't work singularly. I can illustrate this, that sometimes a normative mechanism actually can be coercive because, for example, accountants are required to obtain 40 hours of continuous professional involvement every year so as to be able to keep a license to practice as accountants. However, you find that this is a coercive mechanism and at the same time normative in that when these accountants go for those CPD trainings, they end up sharing ideas and learning new things from each other. So they end up sharing norms which are then transferred back to the manufacturing firm. Then this study has also established the mediating role of institutional isomorphism in the relationship between agency relations, self-organization, and the adoption of management controls. The final theoretical implication is that theoretical triangulation has actually enabled the development of a robust understanding of how firms incorporate historical experiences and socio-political economic pressures into the rules and organizing logics embedded within management control. So the central thesis of this study is that the adoption of management controls by manufacturing firms in Uganda is a function of agency relations, self-organization, and institutional isomorphism. And this is the final model of the adoption of management controls in Uganda's manufacturing sector. This study started off with 5 direct hypotheses and 2 indirect hypotheses. But as you can see, the direct relationship between self-organization to the adoption of management controls was not supported. The methodological implications of this study are threefold. First, the reflective measurement model assessment employed in this study validated the items that measured the study variables, enabling replication by future scholars who would like to study the adoption of management controls. Secondly, a sequential explanatory research design where we collected quantitative data, analyzed it separately, and then collected qualitative data and analyzed it separately, and combined these to come up with themes that explain the adoption of management controls, actually depicted management control as a social construction phenomenon, and this underscored the importance of diverse research methods to understand this phenomenon. And finally, using partial least squares structural equation modeling as opposed to covariance-based structural equation modeling actually allowed us to test multiple predictor variables and the testing of mediation relationships within a single model, as opposed to covariance-based structural equation modeling, where we had to run several. You need to run several models to see which best fits the study data. This study draws 2 important policy implications. We have this study has shown that it is important to create an agency relationship. However, there are variations in how staff are guided towards the firm's profit objective, because some firms don't sign contracts, some staff are not even allowed to unionize, even if there are variations in pay. So the first, we urge government to strengthen implementation of the National Employment Policy 2011 by, first of all, harmonizing all major policies that affect employees within manufacturing firms, and then also to enable adequate budgetary allocation to enable implementation of the National Employment Policy, and as well as respect for international labor standards, which will enable us to import or adopt the standards that are acceptable internationally, which will improve how we direct and employee behavior and decisions towards the firm's profit objective. Then we have also seen that manufacturing firms deal in physical products, which have serious public health implications if they are defective. People can die, people can be hospitalized. And there's a lot of complaints amongst the general population about the quality of products which are produced in Uganda. Actually, UNBS carried out a test and found that 54% of the products on the market were defective. So this study urges that there's a need to strengthen the existing standards in Uganda to improve the quality of products. Because, for example, the UNBS Act actually does not require every manufacturing firm to have the quality mark. It is actually in certain categories. Secondly, this study urges that there's a need to encourage acquisition of skills that facilitate the adoption of international standards. And also there's a need to sensitize the business community and consumers about the attributes of quality products to enable manufacturing firms to actually manufacture quality products, and also the public to demand quality products. For managers in manufacturing firms, I have some advice on how they can improve how they guide employee behavior and decisions towards the firm's profit objective. The first is that they need to clearly define the responsibilities of their staff through proper job design. Secondly, manufacturing firms need to establish specific policies, procedures, and processes to guide employees in the execution of their responsibilities. And third, they need to develop ongoing action plans that drive the manufacturing firm's activities. And finally, manufacturing firms need to develop guidelines on how to implement the benchmarked management controls. As with any study, there are limitations, and this presents an opportunity for future research. First of all, this study was cross-sectional in nature, which is limited in explaining causation. So I believe that a longitudinal research design can possibly solve this. Secondly, a future study which employs a case study design can provide an opportunity to carry out an in-depth and contextually informed examination of management control within a specific organization and give us much richer findings than this study was able to obtain. And thirdly, this study focused only on large manufacturing firms in a bid to reduce bias within the study. So I propose that other studies can test the model which has been developed in this study in manufacturing small and medium enterprises, which have a slightly different operating context. Thank you, members, for listening to me. I apologize for the mishaps in the presentation. This is a manuscript update. Thank Thank you very much. Hello? Chair.
Have we lost the chair?
He is on. I don't know why.
Yes.
Let's see. Okay.
Joseph?
Yes, yes. Go on, doctor. We thought
Am
you
I
had
clear
lost
from that
it.
side now?
Yes, you are. You are.
Okay, thank you very much. Allow me appreciate Joshua for that presentation. And Joseph, you see, Joshua, you'll see that we don't have time. So it has taken quite long. Let me invite the key people who are going to check your work, get where you can record all these issues, and then we can proceed. I would request I begin with Professor Antai, then Professor Picho. Yes, Professor.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Joshua, for your presentation, despite the internet challenge that you had at the beginning. I hope you have a pen and a piece of paper, and I hope your dissertation is near you, where you are. But before I give you my comments, would you flash back your conceptual model? Because there are a few things I would like to say, which are connected to your conceptual framework, if you can. If you can't, it is all right too.
Prof, let me finish it.
Yes.
It's there. Hope you can see it.
We can't see it. At least I cannot see it.
No,
I cannot see it.
I can't see it either.
Let me, I think I did not share. Let me share again.
Yes.
There we are. Can you see it, Prof?
Okay, yes. I'd rather you put in the slide share mode so that it is okay. Right, Joshua, thank you very much. And in the interest of time, I'll actually make summarized comments. And I want to start with the methodology. Joshua, you did say that you used sequential explanatory research design. Is this correct?
That is true, Prof.
It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a slip of the truth. Eh?
It was actually
and you gave some kind of explanation. First of all, a description of what it is and the explanation as to why you used it. Can you say that again?
Why I use it?
Can you repeat what you said about sequential?
In a sequential explanatory research design, this study collected quantitative data and analyzed it separately, and then collected qualitative data and analyzed it separately, and then triangulated both results to come up with themes to explain the adoption of management controls.
I believe there's something missing there. Yes, it is true. You view your study as a two-phase project. You collect quantitative data first in your case, followed by collecting qualitative data second. typically in a sequential explanatory research design, greater emphasis is placed on quantitative data in the study. And of course, you, after conducting that survey, then you follow up with a few individuals who answered positively to the questions through some kind of interviews. Now, eventually what you do, you explain the quantitative results in more depth with the qualitative data. So we usually the end result is really strengthening your discussions, qualitative versus quantitative. However, I see some bit of weakness here because it appears to me as if you conducted two. You had the quantitative, the qualitative, and then at the end of the day, you struggled to mix the two at the end. So possibly a balance should be, or probably compromise should be reached at that level. Now, the second question relates to, or issue, relates to endogeneity bias. Still is a methodological issue. I hope you still remember what you said about endogeneity bias. And when I looked at your writings here, which appears on page 102 of your dissertation, I would rather you actually go back and rewrite that section because the information you have is misleading. If you're going to look at endogeneity, especially in partially squares, of course, you are. I hope you know that when you are dealing with endogeneity, you are dealing with recursivity of a structural model. So you are dealing with the issues of recursiveness, but not the things that you mention in your dissertation on page 102. So you may have to rewrite that section. Now, the other thing that you may have to do, Mandre, is again to run some statistics. If you still have your data set, the right statistics for endogeneity when you're testing for endogeneity. And of course, when you look at the partially squares, which will allow you to go through a series of steps or processes, you discover that one of the steps in partially squares will require you to replace the peerless path modeling, of course, with another kind of established econometric method, which is the two-stage least squares. So two-stage least squares will help you solve that problem rather than relying on the traditional ordinary least squares, because there's a weakness with the partial least squares at this stage here. So if you do that, then you are likely to solve that problem. That is a comment that you may have to rethink, other than just entering other variables like employee, subsector, etc. For control purposes. So you need to run the two-stage least squares. Then the other comment relates to your qualitative data when you are talking about validity and reliability. I had you talk about credibility, transferability, etc. And all your explanations were abstracts, as if you picked a book, right, and you are making notes right? We do not see the reality, what you actually did in order to validate the qualitative. I mean, I would have loved to hear things like that, you know, after the interview, I transcribed these kinds of things. Then I sent the transcriptions back to the fellows who had participated in the interview. And then they went through, right, and they validated each and every statement that appeared in the interview, that kind of thing. In other words, you are down to earth. You are not giving us abstract things. To me, it appeared as if you are just giving us those things that you find in the books. Now, the other question that relates to qualitative is the issue of, I think you called it theoretical saturation. I know that you had quantitative data, right? You also collected the qualitative data, right? And if you collected qualitative data for every institution, for example, if you interviewed 3 people, that's at the depth interview stage, or probably 2 or 1, and went to another organization, right? I would imagine the things that we have in the conceptual model, like adoption of management controls, isomorphism, issues of agency relations, self-organization, right? Possibly you didn't pick all that information from one person in an institution. If you did, possibly maybe you will clarify on that. So in other words, how did you really arrive at this saturation? Is it at the institutional level, or probably, and I mean here, the organization where you had more than one person, or probably the 8 institutions where you had about maybe 20 or 6 or 12 people? The other comment that I want you to think about is, again, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I didn't hear you well. You talk about mediation. And I think in your dissertation, that is on page 103, section 5.4, mediation. Of course, you said certain things, but you also wrote something down here. You correct me if I'm wrong. You said that you relied entirely on Baron and Kenny. Is that correct? First confirm that.
Chair, I used both Baron and Kenny and Zhao et al. 2010.
Yes, you used Baron and Kenny. And that's why I wanted you to actually flash back your conceptual model. The assumption of Baron and Kenny is that you have three, as you can see, 3 variables, and one of them mediates that relationship. And actually, the kind of analysis that is done, generally speaking, is based on 3. In your case, you've got 4 variables. So in other words, your mediation is not a single mediation, but with a multiple mediation. You have got multiple mediation. In fact, 2 in this case, because you have that path, agency relations, institutional isomorphism, and adoption. Then you have self-organization, institutional, and adoption. So in other words, if you generate a series of equations and you solve them simultaneously, what you get at the institutional isomorphism level must satisfy the condition for the first level, where you have agency, institutional, and adoption, and it must also satisfy the condition for this one. That's why we use linear structure relations at the end of the day. You have a series of equations. And of course, for partial, unlike Liesel, PLS has its own limitations, right? But it also does a great job in that case. So I would have loved you not to really depend too much on Baron and Kenny, although the initial understanding of mediation actually comes from Baron and Kenny, that is 1986 his work, but there are significant advancements in that. So you need to be very careful when you start mentioning Baron and Kenny, especially after using partial least squares. Now, again, related to mediation is the fact that when I look at your results for mediation on page, if I could just, page 103, table 31, table 31, 103. Those are the, table 31. Mediation results, and you flashed them there at some stage, and I saw direct results. You had AR, AMC, etc., and then you have indirect results now, and total results, total effects, indirect effects, total effects, and indirect effects. Now, under your decision, I see partial mediation, and I also see full mediation. So assuming that you did get the job very well, you have partial mediation and full mediation. However, you do not tell us as to whether that partial mediation is complementary, because you can have complementary partial mediation. You can also have competitive partial mediation. So I would rather that you tell us whether it is competitive and partial, and the interpretations should also follow that kind of thinking. Now, the other, maybe the last question, the last comment before I give you one question is you said, I saw you having a research question, and to you, that research question assisted you in understanding management controls, right? In fact, you said, how do these fellows understand? I don't know if I got you right. Right. Now, since you used sequential explanatory research design, right? I would expect you that your objective was to actually explain the quantitative results. So if you, in your work, certainly, I think it is page 122, if you go to that page 122, you've got a confirmatory factor analysis. I hope you remember what you did, confirmatory factor analysis. And the confirmatory factor analysis provides, sorry, it is on page 82, I think. The CFA is on page 82. Then your flower is the one we have on page 122. Now, on page 82, you have CFA. And there are certain aspects or components that you obtained. Let me just check a little bit here very fast. 82, if you don't mind. Bear with me. 82. On page 82, you've got your CFA results, and that's under your methodology section. Yes, page 82. When you carry out a CFA, of course, after fitting your CFA model, you've got initiation, and then you have decision and implementation. 3 factors. When you move to your flower, you've got too many things there, and you will check page 122. I don't want to go there in the interest of time, but I want you to reconcile those two, because the qualitative results are supposed to interpret the quantitative in that case. So your understanding qualitatively, or your understanding of management adoption qualitatively should relate to the other. So I want you to provide that link between those two between the findings that you have. Now, Joshua, those were just comments. I want to ask you one or two questions. The first question is, why is the problem that you have tackled worth tackling? Why is the problem of adoption of management control in manufacturing firms worth tackling? And number two, since you've reviewed theories and empirical data that exists, or published works, and probably also documents scattered all over the manufacturing sector or industry, to you, who has had the strongest influence in the development of your subject area in theory and in practice? I can repeat that question. Who has had the strongest influence in the development of your subject area in theory and practice? Chair, that's all. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor. Joshua, please take note of all of those issues. And the question is asked to you. In the interest of time, allow me just give a chance to all the key panelists to give you a few questions. Let me go to Professor Picho and then Professor Rolla.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, Professor Ntai, and all colleagues present on this platform. I would like first and foremost to take this opportunity to thank Joshua for a job well done. Yes, as we appreciated last Sunday, this journey is not an easy journey, and therefore where you have reached surely shows that you have done a lot. And to get to the final end in a manner that is expected, I think this is one of the means to still make your journey be a better journey. So thank you for making your presentation. I would like to give, first of all, comments, which you will take note of, and it will help you in improving on your presentation. And then also I'll be asking you a few questions so that you can clarify on those areas which needs clarification. I must, on the very onset, admit that I've not had the opportunity to read your work as such, and therefore I'm depending entirely on the presentation you have made this morning. Now, from the presentation you have made this morning, if I begin with a general observation, first of all, you are preparing for your viva voce, the live voice defense, and that means that there are certain arts of presentation that you have got to master in order for you to be a very effective communicator, because you are talking to the audience that must understand very well what you are communicating to them. And therefore, it matters that when you prepare for your viva voce, you take care of all factors, you consider all that is required for you to be effective in your communication to your audience. Now, I could see that the first few slides were overloaded with too many stuff. And when a slide is overloaded with stuff, it then forces you to rush, and your objective no longer is to communicate the ideas you want to communicate, but to compete against time and read whatever stuff you have put in that slide. The rule in PowerPoint presentation, one of them, a slide should consist of not of 6 points, but these are not paragraphs. These are really short points whose mastery you must have, and just taking a glance at a point, you should be able to explain it off head, and that tends to show that you have a command of your work. But if you now put very long paragraphs, and then you have to struggle to rush to read them so that you finish reading all that amount of stuff you have placed there, it tends to show that you do not have command of your work, but rather you can only read very well for your audience what you have put on the slide. It doesn't give a very good impression to your readers, especially with regard to command of your work. And so I'm observing that you need really to make PowerPoint be PowerPoint. Very short points, not more than 6 of them in a slide, and you're able to only at a glance at each point, you're able to explain them by yourself and not reading again the slide, because then your audience could read the slides for themselves. I think this is a first general observation I wanted to make in order to improve your presentation, because at the beginning, Chair did inform us that you are using this opportunity to prepare for your defense. And so it matters not only what you present, but also how you present yourself and the slides. So this is just for you to take note of to improve on your presentation. The second point I wanted to make is on your validity and reliability regarding especially the quantitative data. Professor Ntai has already ably pointed out your validity and reliability of qualitative data. Now, when it comes to the quantitative data, you do not show us the CVI. Now, without showing us the CVI, the content validity index obtained. Now, who is going to believe that your instrument you use for collecting the quantitative data were valid, and therefore the findings from such data collected using such instrument are valid? Again, coming to the reliability, you do not show us the Cronbach alpha obtained. Now, without showing us the Cronbach alpha obtained, who will believe you that the instrument was consistent, collected data consistently, and therefore the data you have collected gave the results that should be respected? That's about credibility of your findings, which is derived from the credibility of the tools that you use for collecting the data, which also give credible data. And this goes a long way to inform us that if the data, the credibility of the data, the results, the data is not, one is not sure of, then how can your conclusion be right? And if one doesn't know whether your conclusion is right, how does one come to know that what you are recommending are also right? So that those issues you have got to deal with So regarding the quantitative data collection tools, you need to obtain the content validity index for to determine the validity, and you need to show us the Chrombash alpha to convince us that the tool collected the data consistently. Number 3, because you are rushing so much, I seem not to have had you about your properly about your techniques you used for analyzing your data fully. It is recommended that in analyzing quantitative data, you begin by using descriptive statistics, which are simpler, before you go to inferential statistics, which are more complex. But I seem not to have picked you about which descriptive statistics techniques you have used to analyze your data, and then why you chose those descriptive statistic techniques to analyze your data. Again, when it comes to the inferential statistics, you do not tell us, you do not give us the justification for the choice of the techniques you have used. I think that has got to come out so that your audience are convinced that the right techniques have been used for analyzing your data. In the course of your presentation, especially when you are giving out your discussion, of course, you gave what you found and you compared them with the other authorities, researchers whose findings are similar to your findings, but you keep on saying our findings, our findings, our findings. Your findings and who? You know, in research, there are certain terminologies which have to guide you in putting across your information. It is preferred that the researcher found that our finding, you know, our finding, your finding with who. And then again, in the discussion, I feel it would be in that you put your findings and the findings of others in juxtaposition. And this can be well done if you used a column, a table approach, where on the same thing, you are giving your finding, and in another column, in the same row, you are giving the findings of the others, and therefore giving the similarities between your finding and the findings of others who did similar research before. And this can give the comparator very, very well. If you use that, I think it will bring out clearly your presentation. Now, I find a mixed up in your conclusion. Some of your conclusion, you have 7 objectives. Now, you have to draw conclusions on these objectives, your hypothesis and so forth. Now, some of them are actually not conclusions. Some of them, I notice, are recommendations. You need to distinguish between conclusions and recommendations. And when you go further, one finds that the whole section of recommendation is killed out because you tended to bring some recommendation on some of the, hypotheses, objectives under the conclusion. And so you don't have, I seem not to have had you take us through recommendations objective by objective. But even where under conclusion you gave instead recommendation, the recommendation were not stated in a policy statement form. A recommendation has got to be stated in a policy statement form. That is, you should be able to tell that arising from the results and the conclusion you have drawn, you should be able to recommend what should be done, who should do it, and how it should be done. And so where you turned conclusion into recommendations, even this aspect did not come out, never making them come out in a policy form as they are supposed to be. So you may need to take note of that, distinguish between conclusions and recommendations, and your recommendations should come out objective by objective in a policy form. Thank you very much. I thought this is what I would give as my contribution to your work. Otherwise, thank you for moving this far. And with all these observations being made, this should be able to improve your work and bring it to a level which makes a difference from what it is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Picho, for your keen eye from the beginning up to now. You have done a great job. As I mentioned, in the interest of time, Joshua, please, I hope you have captured each and every question. Those are very, very good comments for you. Allow me to invite also Professor Rolla to give you a few of them. Professor Rolla?
Yes, thank you, Ahmed. Can you hear me?
Yes, Professor, you are clear.
Okay. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Professor Tai for this platform that brings us together to learn. Thank you, Joshua, for your presentation. And I'd also like to thank Professor Picho for his comments as well. Mine is just to add my voice to what has already been shared. Interestingly, I had noted down a few things which Professor Antai has already shared, but I'm just going to bring out some for just emphasis or build on them. All right, Joshua, I would like you to go to your slide on methodology. Just very, very fast. You are on my screen, I'm seeing the conceptual framework. Okay, go to the next slide. The next slide. All right, you said that your study population comprised of large manufacturing firms, and that this was drawn from the UMA, the UMA database. Now, I am aware that UMA has a list of firms from the entire country. So my question was, these firms that you're talking about, were they based in Kampala? Did you pick out the ones that are based in Kampala, or you just use the list and then you are able to go to the large farms located in my village in Arua, or you went to Kisoro? How did you go about this? It did not come out clear. I don't know. Maybe it's there in your book. So the point there is you are using UMA, and then you just remain at telling us, I don't know, maybe I missed it. These farms, where are they located? All right. And then we move on. You said you had three respondents, but I missed hearing who these three were and your justification for that. quickly flash the characteristics of the farm. I'd like to look at the characteristics of the farm. Why I'm interested in this, when it comes to the discussion of your results, I kept asking myself, are your assertions representative of the farms that you're looking at? I'm not seeing the characteristics, organization characteristics.
Let me share. Is it there?
Okay, we have, I'm interested in the categories. We have majority being agro-processing. And this there's agro-processing, followed by machinery and equipment, and then bricks, cement, and concrete. As you discuss, what I noted here is, as you discuss your findings, have at the back of your mind the majority of your respondents, the class. You talked about, for example, self-rewards. And I asked myself, okay, self-rewards in a brick and cement concrete farm, in an agro processing, in a machinery and equipment. Is this really happening? Is this really happening? I hope you get my point. What I'm trying to say is try to align your discussion to the respondents that you have. That brings me to the issue of your key informants, 8 farms. Professor Ntai already asked how you arrived at your saturation point. But for me, just to build on that, I asked myself, which farms are these we are talking about? Do they have similar characteristics with what you have here on the screen? Do they have similar characteristics? Because this has also an impact on your discussion and conclusions and recommendations, because like Professor Ntai pointed out, when it came to discussion, you seem to focus so much on the qualitative to support, and you are running away from your quantitative, and yet your study is largely quantitative. You use one case, you use results from just one case to, over-defend a particular hypothesis. And I was asking myself, was that one case sufficient? I don't know. This is just something for you to think about. And then I asked myself, when did you collect this data? Was it in 2019 or 2020? And if it was in 2020, around which period? Was it before COVID or after or during the COVID? This, because I'm trying to look at the relevance of your results given the current situation. The relevance of your result given the current situation. So try to, I don't know, the word has disappeared, but what I'm trying to say is, as you discuss your finding, put at the back of your mind the current situation. What is in the environment now? What is in the environment now? But then this also depends on when you collected the data. If you collected before COVID or after COVID, that has an implication on the policy that now you are trying to recommend. Then also, as you are presenting your discussions, your results, you kept interchanging adoption of management controls with management controls. On some hypotheses, I was seeing adoption of management controls. Then on other hypotheses, I was seeing the adoption being dropped. And the question I put down was, is adoption of management control the same as management controls? Be very careful. When you're talking about adoption, it is adoption. And when you're talking about just management control alone, that is something else. Don't take these things for granted. Don't mix things. Look at that. Then on the mediation, I had similar views with Professor Ntai, but just to add on to what he has already submitted, when you have results on mediation, it will be good not to hide behind the statistics and instead present for us the path diagrams. With the path diagrams, you are able to see the mechanism through which this mediation happens. Now, because the mechanism through which this mediation happens was not demonstrated, when it came to the discussion section, you were struggling. So in the discussion section, I was not able to see what you are meaning by partial mediation and also what you meant by full mediation. This is something for you to think about and also improve on. Then please take us to hypothesis 3. Hypothesis 3, I know time is not on our side. Hypothesis 3. You may answer
the
that.
discussion of?
Yes, a discussion of hypothesis 3. Hypothesis 3, you mentioned that the hypothesis, the hypothesis that you had, I'm not seeing it. I'm seeing results of.
There it
okay.
is.
All right. Scroll down a bit on my screen. I'm not seeing. Oh, you put it on slideshow. I want to read that sentence. Okay. There exists a relationship between self-organization and adoption of management controls. This hypothesis was rejected. And then you go ahead and say, that statement, which Professor Pincho even said that you should stop reading directly like that. No, but that's not my point. My point here is, as you are discussing this part, the interpretation of the rejection did not come out clearly. What did you mean by this is not significant or the hypothesis was rejected? That did not come out clearly. And then in addition to that, don't you think that this relationship was not supported because probably the attributable explanation for this is a full mediation? Because now it would suggest that self-organization may not explain significant variations in adoption of management controls, because it may only be able to do this through another mechanism that is now the mediator variable, something like that. So what I had noted here is that rejection could have been as a result of a mediation effect. That is something for you to note. Sometimes when it depends on your conceptualization. Sometimes the mediation effect provides the explanation for some of the rejected hypotheses. This is something for you to think about. Proceed to the slide on implication, policy implication. I'll build on what Professor Pincho has said. When it came to the policies, you see, so I'm looking at the first policy, but I want to concentrate on the second policy. Encourage adoption on UNBS quality work. So I asked myself, which results inform this? Which results inform this? In other words, please refer, when you're writing the policy implications, it has to come out from the discussion and conclusion of your findings. I asked myself, were you looking at quality work? Were you looking at quality of products? Where is this coming from? And yet you sought to explain adoption of management controls. So what I was expecting here was anything that will enhance management controls. This is something for you to think about. I had also noted some things on qualitative results, which Professor Ntai has mentioned, but just to build on that, you had a question, how do these people understand management controls? And then you flashed a wonderful picture there. But the answer to that question did not come out clearly. When you ask me, how do small businesses manage their working capital? I am supposed to demonstrate, to answer that question, I'm supposed to demonstrate the how. How does this happen? Yeah. So how do they understand MC? How? The how did not come out clearly. Pay attention to what Professor Ntai had already put across. Friends, I would like to stop here. Thank you, Joshua, for your presentation. All these are just comments for you to go and improve your work. Over to you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Professor, for those detailed comments also to Joshua. I think, Joshua, you have a lot to do in the remaining few days to 4th. And we are running out of time. Let me give one more last chance to Dr. Gideon within a few minutes, and then I'll call back Joshua, and then we conclude.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Joshua, congratulations and thank you for this journey. I had a number of comments, but they have been highlighted on. I just want to mention a few that have not been tackled. Joshua, you said the model prediction somewhere that is 66.3. You, as somebody who is coming into a scholarly kind of club, what is your view on this? Are you happy that your model is explaining 70% and the 30% is what really needs to be done? I think you need to bring a very strong argument on that, other than celebrating that percentage. The other one are hygiene issues. I think I also want to reckon that. That's why you are saying how, especially even when it comes to theoretical underpinning. You are saying the theory explains how the farm's structure and processes change. One would want to know how, not really saying how. I think either it is what you want to explain. I think the use of those words are heavy, and the idea I did not see the how. The other one, hypothesis 3 still, you said that you rejected. I think the use of the words If you have already rejected, then why are you discussing? You actually, the exact word would be, you failed to reject. Otherwise, if you rejected, then what are you going to discuss on that? You had also, you said that your qualitative was to answer the central research question. I think that was also used wrongly. The central research question, I actually had to see whether you had a point of departure in your, when you started, it was not there. So I think it's not central research question. It is a research question. In that case, you had a preposition that maybe the qualitative results we are trying to address. I think the other one is on discussion. Seriously, I do not see the concrete realities. I do not see really from your sample, from these farms, you do not even bring out practical reality of what is happening. I think much as you had the vignettes, you needed really to talk to the grandmother to really appreciate what is happening. And if you critically observe from your discussion of all, based on all your hypotheses, the problematization was a bit superficial. Why? The results are consistent. But did you really look at the scope of previous studies, the methodology they use it, and then you also try to bring what is new? Actually, that is why now I say, what is now new in your work? If your results are consistent, what is it that you are saying differently now? I think you may need to look at that. I think the other one which I had written somewhere here is also the use of words. You are saying that, for example, I quoted the slide 29, where you're saying the farms that encourage the opening of information will adhere. They will adhere to regulatory requirements. Now, what does it imply? When you refocus on your research design, you gather data at point in time using cross-sectional. Sincerely, are you in causation or you are into the association? So I think the use of words really may tend to deter your research design, and therefore I need to say that you may need to rethink about how you're writing and how you're. I think the other one was the policy UNBS. I think Prof has mentioned about it. Chair, allow me to submit with those ones since the majority have been highlighted by the previous colleagues, senior colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Gideon. Joshua, as I call you back, I may not call for more questions because of time, unless when there is something really burning from either the other senior colleagues or the students. You can put it in the chat. But there's one comment for you from Professor. There's some other comments, one from Professor Rolla and others. Check them in the chat. Professor has just submitted something here for you. And he's saying, please revisit the way you use your critical realism. And he explained why. Please copy out that question and take it into the issues must address before 4th of October. Allow me now, if there's not any other hand up, invite you to give some light on a few of these issues. You may not give light on all of them. Yes, Prof.
Ahmed, I think
yes, Prof.
let us just allow him to take note and go and improve on those things. He may not There are questions that Professor Ntai asked. I think there were 2 or 3. Maybe those are the ones he can answer because of time. Otherwise, the others are comments for him to go and improve his work.
Okay, I think I'll take Professor Ola's guidance. Please respond to the 2 questions that Professor Antai asked you. And then, of course, we can proceed. But take note of the questions in the chat also.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olugembe, for this opportunity. I would like to thank Professor Antai, Professor Picho, Professor Robia, and Dr. Nkurunziza for your wonderful comments. I can assure you I'm going to take them to heart and work on them, and I know they're going to improve my work. I've also seen some comments from Dr. Idabu and Professor Kagari, and also the ones from Professor Antai in the chat. I'm going to take them and use them to improve my work. So Professor Antai asked me 2 critical questions. First is, what is the problem that you tackled worth tackling? So you can see that the manufacturing sector is actually quite important to the development of any nation, and it is something that our government has been grappling with. The contribution to GDP has actually almost stagnated. So the question then is that how can management control actually help improve on their performance? Because the factors might not just be only farm factors, but actually the employees themselves can actually improve the operations of a manufacturing farm. However, in agency theory, we have the challenge that there's always a problem of self-interest and moral hazard and things like that and shacking. So management control actually can help guide the behavior and decisions of the employees towards the farm's profit objective. And once the farms are profitable, then they can also actually contribute to the overall performance of the manufacturing sector. So that is why I wanted to find out how can management control actually help improve the performance of the manufacturing firms. Then Prof. Antai asked me, since you have reviewed literature, who has had the strongest influence in the development of the theory and practice? The challenge we have in management control and where it came from in management accounting is that we lack actually single theories that actually can explain fully management control. However, this term management control was actually coined by Professor Robert Anthony from Harvard University in 1965. He sought to delineate management control from the governance level and also operational control. However, several scholars have come through and have added as incrementally. For example, Kaplan and Johnson have come up with mechanisms like, for example, the balance scorecard. All those are contributing to the practice of management control. And the definition actually, which was adopted in this study, was Professors Malmi and Brown, 2008, who came up actually with the definition of management control to be focusing on the systems, rules, values, practices, and any other activities that are meant to guide employee behavior and decisions towards the firm's profit objective. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Thank you very much, Joshua, for your response.
Chair, before, Chair, if you
yes,
could
Prof.
allow just a second, before Joshua leaves. Joshua, relating to the idea of critical realism, I want you to really think very hard because the methodologies for critical realism, the methods for critical realism may not have been thought through by you. So you may have to change a few things. Since you indicated that you use the critical realism philosophy, there are certain acceptable methodologies in critical realism, and I do not seem to see them in your work. Please go and think through. If you could review literature before the date you are going to present your work, that would be very good. But I don't know whether you really have much, especially when you do indicate that you went to a few manufacturing firms I think about 8, especially when it comes to qualitative. And yet the categories of farms were more than 8 actually, and you talk about saturation. But look at the method that we are supposed to use under political realism. So you might be having some challenges there. Chair, that's all I wanted to add.
All right, Professor, can you comment on, somebody wanted general to learn, I think Paul Edabu, I need to understand if one rejects the hypothesis, does it mean one should not discuss it? Professor Antai, you can help other participants to learn from this.
I think the one who is asking a question is directly asking the person who responded to the, but you discuss certainly. There's no harm about discussing, but you need to be mindful about the information that you put forward when you are discussing. I think the issue here was that yes, Joshua did discuss, but the discussion didn't seem to be consistent with the results generated. That's what I can say. Other members can add on that.
I missed what Professor Ntai said. I beg your pardon, Professor Ntai.
I did say that you can discuss, and there's no harm in discussing your results. However, what Joshua did, I think, from the comments given by the member who was very critical, is that his discussion was not consistent with his results. That's what I picked from the comment that was made. But you discuss, certainly. But you need to be mindful of those things. And I think what Lola said at some stage was that you have a mediation, right, in between there that seems to have eroded that relationship that he was anticipating. So I think the discussion did not take into consideration some of those things that came on board. But you discuss.
Thank you very much. Maybe in addition to what Professor Tai has said, when you get out there to conduct a research and you formulate your hypothesis, I think you do not go to go and confirm them or accept that. You leave it to go on either side. Either you accept it or you reject it, but the acceptance or the rejection is dependent on the findings which are going to come up with. You know, first and foremost, you have used other scholars. They carry out their research in a different milieu from your own milieu. That's a different time, in different places, different circumstances, and so forth. And these are capable of bringing variations between your findings and the findings of the others. So you need to still discuss it and give possible reason why probably the hypothesis is rejected, arising from the finding which led to the rejection of the statement. That's when the researcher now comes in, because there is what the others have said, there's what your finding has come up with, and there is what you are coming up with, and giving possible variations, possible reasons why the findings could have come out like that, leading to rejection of the hypothesis as opposed to accepting the hypothesis. So at both sides, I think discussion is critical. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I think we are coming to the end of this discussion. Joshua, on behalf of this team and the Socratic Research team, and on behalf of all the members, we wish you the best. Wish you the best as you finally defend your work. Hopefully, you will go through very well. Please address the comments. You have so many of them. You have so many of these comments. But if Professor Kagari is still online, I would request him to give us the closing remarks and a prayer because he's part of that your team. So I would request him to give you one word, one final word, and also close this session. Professor Kagari.
Wow. Thank you, Dr. Orgembe. Thank you, Professor Ntai, for this platform. Thank you, members on core and those who have participated in this discussion. Thank you very much, Joshua, for the presentation and having walked all this journey to this level. And I wish you success on your final presentation on, is it 4th of October? And please take care of, take care of all these comments and be ready to defend accordingly. And with the Lord amidst us, we pray that you do your best on that day. So members, thank you very much for these comments and for being attentive for all this time since the presentation began. So Heavenly Father, we thank you for our life. We thank you for guiding us through this work. We pray that you continue to guide us in whatever we do and that we have fruitful Sunday and the days to come. Through your name I've prayed. Thank you very much. Amen. And so members.
Thank you, Professor Joshua. We thank you and we wish you the best. We meet next Sunday. Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. God bless you all.
Bless you too.